Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Sam.
And I'm Melissa.
I grew up in the FLDS community. It is a polygamous group run by Warren Jeffs, which I moved out of when I was 18 years old.
I was raised LDS. Sam and I have been married for almost 8 years now and have 2 beautiful babies.
Yes, we do.
Before we get started today, we want to announce we are going to be doing a women's panel this weekend. We're going to be filming it with myself, having been raised LDS, Joanna, who's been on our channel before from the FLDS, and then also Amanda Ray from the Kingston group. So if you have questions, please either hop onto our Instagram at growingupinpolygamy and put your questions in there on our stories, or you can also go to our community board on YouTube, where we also left a place for you to leave your comments and ask questions that you want to know about what it was like growing up in all of those different groups as a woman.
I'm looking forward to this because so many of you have asked, okay, well, it's great to hear Sam's stories, but what was it like for the women?
Yeah.
So now you get to see what it was like for the women in all three of these different groups and kind of compare and contrast the experiences they had.
Yeah, and so we're really excited about that. So go and vote and leave your questions, and then that's going to be released next week.
But today we are back for another review on the documentary on Netflix, Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey, Part 3. Yep. So we're going to dive into that. We've tried a couple different formats and have had some positive and maybe try a little different way from people in the comments. So we're going to try something a little different today that will hopefully allow us to stay on track timeline-wise, but also stay a little bit more focused instead of straying off on different topics.
Yeah, exactly. So kind of trying to combine and hopefully we'll get it even a little bit better where we can kind of please everybody in the different format that we're going to try. So
wish us luck.
Yeah. Wish us luck in trying to keep everybody happy.
Yeah, exactly.
But we really do appreciate all the comments and like which way you prefer, because it does help us kind of see, engage, and know, okay, maybe we can try something different or find a better way. So we really do appreciate all those comments.
Yes, thank you a lot for all of your comments, not just those ones, but all of you. So much love and support. We really do appreciate it.
Yep. So let's get started.
All right, we'll dive right in.
Okay, so the beginning of part 3 is we are now seeing El Dorado, very, very small town, talking about the fact that there's not a lot that goes on there at all. And it's just interesting that he picks that place. Well, we kind of know why, right? Like, it's very secluded. No one's expecting it. What did they say? That everybody in the town thought that it was going to be a retreat, right?
A shooting retreat is what they were told. I don't know if that's what Warren told them or had the people tell them, but they assumed it was a shooting retreat or a hunting retreat. And so anyway, so that's what they assumed. And then some of the locals started to realize, oh, hey, this is they're building a huge temple in there, or a building. They didn't know it was a temple. So obviously that caused some concern and raised some red flags.
And at that point, everybody in Short Creek still had no clue what was going on, right? Like, you guys didn't even know it was in Texas.
No. So it was so secretive that I mean, when I had a brother and a sister that just all of a sudden disappeared, and I didn't know, because of the way it was talked about this holy place that was a Zion, a heaven on earth, and that it was this most amazing, you can't even imagine how amazing it is. I didn't know if my brother and sister that went, if they were just like talking with Jesus Christ and God. Like, I didn't know. Like, I didn't know to what extent it was. And I just felt that I wasn't worthy to be able to go and do this. And so I felt horrible, because I'm thinking, man, if they're communicating and visiting with the gods and Jesus Christ himself and those type of things, you can imagine how insignificant and bad I felt that I wasn't able to do that as well.
Did you guys know that it was an actual place, like in a different state somewhere? Or did you think it could have been like within the community, they got to go to like a different house or a different place? Like, did you guys know it was going to be like a compound somewhere?
I don't know. Maybe some people did. Had some more insight than I did, but no, I had no idea. I mean, it could have been, we were always talked about how Zion would be lifted up and the great destructions would come and destroy the world, and Zion would be lifted up and everyone in Zion would be saved, and then Zion would be sat back down on the earth, and then they would continue to do God's work, or to, yes, whatever that meant at that point. But yes, it was, no, I had no idea. I didn't know if people were being raised up into the heavens somewhere, to build Zion, or if it was down the street a few miles. There was no information about it.
No information where it was.
No.
And at that same time, I mean, then they flash back to Short Creek, where there's starting to be more reporters, more information going on of like the underage marriages. Now, did you personally like see underage marriages in your life? Because the mayor of Colorado City, which a lot of people have asked to, like whether or not the mayor that is shown in this show is Sam's father. It is not.
No. So, yes, the mayor shown in this video is Dan Barlow, and he was the mayor of Colorado City, which is the city in Short Creek, half of the Short Creek area that was in Colorado, or in Arizona, and then in Utah State, Hilldale City. My father was the mayor of Hilldale City, not Colorado City. And Dan Barlow, that was in this video, was the mayor of Colorado City.
Yeah, so I mean, he clearly says like, okay, we know that the legal age of marrying in Utah is 16 years old, which is still kind of crazy that it is that young, but right. 16 years old. But did you ever see someone get married under the age of 16?
Yes. In fact, one of my own sisters I saw get married underage, under the age of 16. And so I don't know if Dan Barlow knew about these things happening, or if maybe in his family and the people he knew that were close to him didn't ever have that happen. I can't say for sure, but it definitely was happening even in those times. And then, of course, as we see, it just kept getting younger and younger as Warren got his way.
Yeah.
So
as they start talking about the fact that like Warren disappears, right? Like all this interest is happening. Warren kind of knows that stuff is going to be happening soon, that like people are going to start coming after him. And then all of a sudden Warren just disappears from the community completely. Do you remember that happening? Like all of a sudden Warren was in church and then he just wasn't? Like what was that?
I do.
Like
I do remember this happening, and it was not really shocking, because before he disappeared, like you just mentioned, a lot of news reporters were starting to show up. We didn't think that the news reporters were there just trying to get information or trying to help us or save us or whatever. We assumed, because of the way we were raised, that the news reporters were there to try to destroy us. They were trying to come and find any way they could to destroy the work of God, to destroy his prophet. So when Warren disappeared, we were rooting for him as members of the FLDS church. We were, yay, get out of here, before the law catches up with you, because we assumed that they were just wrongfully accusing him of all of these things that we were told, or we didn't even know about any of these things at that time, but we just assumed that they were making up stuff just to try to get him in prison.
So even when he disappeared, like no one was surprised. You guys were all excited for him.
I wasn't surprised at all. No, I assumed, I was under the impression that they would never ever be able to catch him, even though he was on the FBI's most wanted list. We assumed that they would never catch him because he was being protected by God.
Yeah, man. And they kind of mentioned like all these people are coming to the community and trying to help like these women and these children. But you can't make a case unless somebody is willing to speak up. And the victims are not going to speak up because it would be talking against their religion, like talking against the prophet. Yeah. It would be talking against their fathers and their husbands. And, we had someone comment and kind of ask like, don't they realize that there's help, like that's rape, that's abuse? And if they do, like, do people go to law enforcement ever in those situations? And I mean, obviously Elisa Wall is a really good example of the fact that like, even with everything that was going through, she even mentions like she went through 3 years of pleading and pleading and pleading with the prophet. And it just kind of goes to show you that those 3 years, she didn't think for a second about going to law enforcement about what was happening.
Well, law enforcement, local law enforcement anyway, they didn't have the final say. If Warren said something like, hey, you need to be married to this person, if she went to law enforcement, because law enforcement was also members of the church, they would probably tell her, okay, well, if you have a problem with your marriage, we can't do anything about this. Go talk to Warren Jeffs. And she tried, obviously, but no, she didn't think that there was anywhere to turn or anyone to go to, because to go to law enforcement outside of the community was unheard of, because we were told that they were against us and they were trying to destroy us and all these horrible things. So I can't imagine that anyone would feel comfortable going to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, from there, Elisa kind of shares about like miscarriages, feeling like it's all her fault, that God is punishing her for not being worthy. And obviously, Sam can't really speak for this, but I have talked to a bunch of the women from out there, and they've said that, obviously things like miscarriages were very hard because the women would be blamed, and they were putting that blame on themselves as well, that they weren't worthy, and that no matter how much they pleaded with the prophet, in Elisa's case, at the end of the day, they knew that they weren't. It was very rare for women to be able to get help. And at this point, Warren's like on the run too, and he's not even around to be able to even do anything, even if he would have. Right? Which is like so sad.
The women of the FLDS church were taught and were very good at just putting on a brave face.
Keeping sweet.
Exactly.
Praying and obeying.
Putting on a smile, even though inside they were aching and just going through all of these things that I can't even begin to imagine. But Elisa Wall, she is she's one of the unicorns out there that was actually a little bit more brave and was able and went to Warren Jeffs to talk to him, because most women wouldn't even dare talk to him. If that's what he told them to do, they would just go with it no matter what.
Yeah.
So she was stepping outside of her line, even going and talking to him about the fact that she was having any troubles.
Which, thank goodness she was, even though she didn't get help then, her bravery later was able to take down Warren, which is awesome.
Right.
They then kind of mentioned the fact that like all of a sudden security cameras went up everywhere in the town. Was that only after Warren was on the run or not around as much? Or do you remember these cameras going up everywhere?
I do remember them going up, and I do not remember if it was before Warren's disappearance or if it was after. But I do remember them going up, and I can tell you I felt like I was always being watched. And it was definitely a little bit weird. We were told that it was for our own good and for our own safety.
That's what I was gonna ask. I'm like, what did they tell you?
Assuming that meant that if the outsiders were going to try and come and try to attack us or whatever, they would tell us that they would have that recording, that they would see it coming before anything happened, and they'd be able to stop it. So we were under the assumption that it was for our own good and for our own safety. But now, as I learned, that it was a lot of spying on people, which makes a lot of sense now, because they would call us and say, hey, God has spoken to me, and we received revelation that you were doing this, that, or the other. And now I'm thinking, oh, well, it wasn't so much God, it was your video cameras. So anyway, it's interesting, but I do remember those going up and feeling like you couldn't really get around the community without being seen in some way or another.
Yeah, it's crazy how much, like, even though we later find out, and we'll go into this more later, like, Warren's out having the time of his life at this point anyway. So the fact that he's even trying to keep tabs on people and like want that much control while also wanting to do whatever he wants. Like, it's not like he was like sitting in a hotel room hiding, just watching the security cameras, just trying to keep track of everyone, right? Like, he's like, no, I'm going to go out and go to strip clubs and go to Mardi Gras and go do all these things. And I'll get one of my henchmen to sit there and watch all the security cameras and make sure they're doing what I want. Do you know what I mean?
You know,
like, that's so crazy.
It's sickening. It really is. I mean, I've tried to be as respectful as I can towards everything, because I still have a lot of family members that are a part of this, and I don't want to come across as saying anything negative towards them.
It's not the people.
But Warren himself, and if you still believe in him, I'm sorry, but he's a monster. I mean, I have to be honest. He learning about the stuff that he was doing while doing what he was doing to the community, because he was supposedly trying to keep us from all of these evil things, and to now learn that he was doing those himself. I mean, I don't even have the words. It's just unspeakable. I don't even know what to say about it. But it's very, very infuriating. I'll say that.
I know when we were watching it, Sam had mentioned too that some of the things that like Warren was doing, that was the first time you had ever seen what he was actually doing, right?
No,
I mean, Sam's been out for a long time now, and it is still the first time that Sam actually saw footage of what had happened.
I had no idea. I had no idea that he was doing these things. I assumed that he was either always on the road, traveling, trying to get away from law enforcement, or I assumed that, or at least when I was still a part of the FLDS church, I assumed that God had a secret place for him somewhere where the law enforcement wouldn't be able to see it because they didn't have magic eyes or whatever. You assume those when you really believe it, you assume those kind of things. There's stories in the Bible and other scriptures that talk about people just not being able to see certain people because God wouldn't want them to be harmed or caught. So anyway, it just, I would have never guessed in a million years that he was up to just out there partying, really, is what he was doing.
Yeah. And when he came back, and they talk about the fact that he came back for one specific meeting to stand up and kick out a bunch of prominent men. Sam was actually there for that meeting. Do you want to talk about what that was like and what you remember of that?
It was... I was fairly young at this time. I'm trying to remember exactly how old I would have been. Do you remember what year it was that happened?
2004.
2004. Okay. So, at this time,
I'm 14.
I'm 14. I'm a young teenager. So it's not like it was... I wasn't afraid of getting my family, or at least like wives or anything, or children taken away from me. So I didn't have the same level of fear as some of these other men did, and women. But it was definitely one of the most intense moments of my life, even now looking back. Just the amount of the dead silence, the fear, the tears. And I saw with my own eyes, and I can bet money that the entire town was just sobbing when they left this meeting, because this was completely unexpected. No one saw this coming. And some of these men that he stood up and just forced out of town, not even allowing them to say goodbye to their families, just okay, your family no longer belongs to you, you're out of here. Like, as if you don't matter. And so, yeah, it's just, no one saw it coming, and everyone was completely shocked and just completely afraid that he would snap and do anything. At that point, anything was possible.
Yeah.
Anything was possible at that point. And so I think everyone was just afraid that, okay, well, what's going to happen next? And it wasn't that they were afraid of Warren at this time, because they still believed that he was talking for God. So they were afraid that the all-seeing, all-powerful God that was watching every move that we were doing was making these moves, and that he would, if you did anything wrong, take your family away, and that would be the end of it.
In that meeting, were there any, or even after the meeting, were there any women that followed their husbands and said, no, I'm leaving with him?
I don't know for sure. It sounds like that one of the men that spoke in this, what was his name? The one that wore the cowboy hat.
Yeah.
The straw hat. Weiler is his last name. It sounds like he convinced his family to leave with him.
Oh, okay.
But other than that, I don't know of anyone else that their family, because these women were taught their entire lives that, hey, you follow the prophet, you follow the church, you follow the teachings. And if your husband doesn't follow those teachings, then you have to continue to follow those teachings. And so if the prophet stands up, and you're assuming he's talking for God, and he stands up and says, your husband is an evil person now, and he has to get out of here and repent, you're going to believe the prophet. You're going to say, okay, well, now I don't trust my husband anymore, and I don't want him around because apparently he's this evil person.
Yeah, they said that in the meeting, like, everybody, like, he asked everyone to raise their hand if they, like, in agreement Do you remember everyone raising their hand? And did you raise your
I
hand?
do. And at a ripe old age of 14, I was not going to lie. I was kind of just going along with the flow. I didn't know. I didn't.
I wouldn't blame you for it if you did. I was just curious, like if kids voted, like did kids raise their hand too with parents?
I was so afraid of everything at that point. I mean, I looked around and I believe, if I remember correctly, as soon as I saw my father raise his hand, I was, boop, yep, I'm all in. So that was kind of the signal that if he agrees with it, then I agree with it. But I wasn't really thinking. I don't know that I was thinking too much about. I mean, I was probably scanning the room to see if there were any cute girls in there. I don't know if I was thinking that much about. No, I'm joking. It was way too intense to think of anything else. But I didn't understand fully what was going on.
When it was happening, and he starts listing off all of these men. Did it hit you or were you worried that your father was going to be one of those men? Definitely.
And he was not. Thank goodness he was not in that meeting, one of them. But I do know that somehow he slipped under the rug, because he was right there along with all those other men, had very similar callings, was very influential in the church. And so it was it was a very surprising thing that he wasn't, actually. And I believe that he was very afraid that he would be on that list as well. So no, he wasn't on it, but later on, unfortunately, a similar thing happened to him. Not during that meeting, but later on. So
when they talk about the women and the children belonging to the priesthood, what does that mean?
It means that the church, or the priesthood, I guess, if you want to call it that, gave your wives to you. Basically, the men don't own anything. The priesthood owns everything. The church owns everything. Your wives are given to you. So technically, the children you have with your wives are owned by the church, and everything belongs to the church or the priesthood, And so if you don't follow exactly as you're supposed to, then it's out of your control what happens to your family.
One thing that kind of stood out specifically to me, and you can tell me if you felt the same, is when, and I can't remember his name, but he kind of mentioned the fact that, when he got kicked out, it was Warren's brother, and he said,
yes, Wallace.
Wallace Jeffs. And he said that Warren had said that he was a son of Satan, but that he couldn't, it was hard for him that he had bred into his family. You want your family to support you and to leave with you and to know that you are not a son of Satan, but he had bred into them to follow the prophet. And so when he was kicked out, he couldn't really blame his family, and the guilt of knowing that he was the one that could convince them to follow the prophet so fully. I'm I can't imagine having that burden on you, knowing that this situation is not your fault in any way, because it's totally Warren's fault, but at the same time that your family's going to go along with it because you had taught them what you believe to be true.
Right. Well, you believe that, or you taught your family as a man, as a father out there, you teach your family that the words that are coming out of Warren's mouth and the prophets before him are words from God. And so it's not just some man making these decisions. You're assuming, and you've taught your family that what he says is from God. So of course the family is going to follow what they believe is coming from God. And it was a lot of talk about be more like Warren Jeffs, be more like him, talk like him, act like him, dress like him, do your hair like him. I mean, he was this image in the community that everyone was supposed to be just like. And so, I remember my own mother telling me things like, man, I wish you would dress more like Warren Jeffs. You can just tell how good he looks and how well he dresses, and those type of things were very common. And so he was just someone that we all respected and admired so much that when he said something, we said, okay, done deal.
Dang. When Leroy was kicked out and he was considered a son of perdition, I was like, oh, we need to explain what a son of perdition is for those of you who haven't ever heard that term before. And And I know also it means a little bit differently. We had someone ask in the comments kind of the difference between hell to the LDS versus the FLDS. And, the LDS, outer darkness, is really only for sons of perdition, but it takes a lot to be considered a son of perdition in the LDS faith. What does it mean to be a son of perdition in the FLDS faith?
Well, really, it means that you go against the church. It's as simple as that. There's not really, if you don't follow the rules, and if you do something that forces you out, then you become a son of perdition. Basically, it's as simple as, if you're an apostate, you're a son of perdition. It's as simple as that. An apostate meaning that you choose to leave or you're forced out because of something you did, then you will be automatically qualified for the darkest, deepest point in hell.
To go and live with Satan. So that's,
very terrifying teachings.
Yeah. So, that's what son of perdition means. So it's pretty intense when they talk about it. And that's why they talk about, when they're talking about hell and damnation, that's what they're talking about, becoming a son of perdition and that's kind of where that equates. When Leroy's wife was talking about the fact that they had to burn all the pictures, did you have that in your family? Well, I know that your family had said that that's why there's not a lot of pictures. We don't have a lot of pictures of when Sam was little. Right. But did you ever see that, like, before you left? Did people burn pictures of the people that had left?
So a lot of this stuff, I think, started happening more once I moved out. But I do know that our parents didn't like us to look at any pictures of anyone that had left.
Okay.
So there were still pictures there, but there was always this feeling of you shouldn't be looking at pictures of these people because they're bad now. So...
But at least they weren't burning them, so that's something.
Right. They may have shortly after I left, because it seemed like that was pretty common. I heard from some of my other siblings that have left the church, I guess, several years after I did, and they did experience some of this. Oh yeah, we had to destroy all the pictures of you guys. So, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. So anyway,
we only have, I'd say, one picture of you by yourself. And probably like less than 10 pictures of all of Sam's childhood. And we've heard rumors that there might be more. We don't know how many are burned or how many are still around, that maybe someday, hopefully, we'd have access to them. But
I don't know, because back in the day when my family was taking pictures, it was all, you printed out. There wasn't a whole lot of digital pictures. So I don't know that there is a thumb drive anywhere that has any of these pictures saved. I did have a baby book, and my mother created a very nice, beautiful baby book of all these pictures. And probably over 100 pictures in this book of just young baby into toddler age. And man, makes me sad to think about it. They burned that.
Hopefully they didn't.
Next topic.
Sorry, next question. After they were talking about the men being kicked out, they were talking about what Zion is. And basically that it was heaven on earth, and that people knew, you might not have known where Zion was going to be, but you knew what Zion was, right? Like, what were you taught about what Zion was?
That it was this perfect place. But really, the simple terms is heaven on earth. That really it was so perfect that everyone was happy, everyone worked and perfect harmony. And it was a place so good that Jesus Christ and God himself could show up at this place and visit his people, because it was so righteous. No sin and nothing like that. And that it was the most beautiful place you could possibly imagine as well.
And it was something that was talked about a lot in the FLDS too, is talking about like yearning. Even the ranch is named, Yearning for Zion Ranch. But even like above their doorways, if any of you have watched our video of the tour of Hilldale, they would put Zion like over their doorways as well, as a symbol of like trying to make the community and make their homes heaven on earth, right?
Right. In preparation for going to Zion, or being able to be a part of it. So yes, it was definitely a place or Zion was a thing that was talked about a lot, and it was always, we need to be Zion, meaning we need to be as if we were like good enough to be in Zion. And so we were always trying so hard to be our very best so that we could qualify to be in Zion.
How old were you the first time you noticed someone disappear? And did you know that they were disappearing to Zion?
That was the assumption. If ever someone just all of a sudden disappeared, this is kind of sad to think about it now, but if someone disappeared, we didn't think, oh, maybe we should go in the mountain and look for this
them.
person. Maybe we should file a missing
persons.
person report. That was not the first thing that came to our mind. The first thing that came to our mind was, oh, that person must have finally been righteous enough, and now they're in Zion. Wow, good for them, And so we did. I don't remember how old I was. I would have been a young teenager, but when my brother and I believe one of my sisters around the same time all of a sudden disappeared. And the interesting thing is eventually they came back, and it was just still they wouldn't talk about it. And I remember thinking, man, these people are so much better than me. Like, am I allowed to go talk to them? Is this okay to have this conversation? And so it was definitely, there wasn't the same feeling. It was like they were in a different, I don't know. It was hard to even talk to them.
Like a different class of people?
It was like I wasn't even good enough to talk to them anymore, is the way I felt, even though they were back in the community.
Did you hear of any, like when they're talking about, I know this is kind of jumping ahead to later, but when they talked about like the children being taken away in the middle of the night and things like that, did you experience that in your own family?
Thank goodness I did not. I did not experience that. I don't know if that type of thing happened within my family after I moved out, but while I was there, no, I did not.
That's
Thank
good.
Goodness, because
that's absolutely heartbreaking.
I don't even know. Here's the crazy thing is I'm thinking about that. Parents to these children, if they truly believed in Warren Jeffs, would much rather their child be taken from them and sent to this Zion place than for their children to ever consider leaving the church. Even just because that's to them, that's so much better. Because if you leave, then you have no chance of seeing them or being with them in the afterlife. And to them, that's kind of the most important thing. So that's the first time I've really realized the fact that they would actually, a lot of these parents were probably feeling like, well, as long as they're in Zion, that's good. I'm glad that they're in Zion. But some of these children, though, were babies when they were sent, harsh words, but in some cases ripped from their mother's arms and sent
exactly
to these
the right
places.
word.
And so regardless of what they probably felt they should feel about, oh, it's so amazing they can go to Zion, there's no way that they weren't just crushed inside when these, because they had no idea how long it would be before they got to see these children, or if they would ever see them again.
Yeah.
So just heartbreaking.
Yeah. One of the sayings that they used, which it reminded me a lot of Manti's story. If you haven't had a chance to watch Manti's story, then maybe I'll put a link above for you to be able to see his story. But he talks about the saying, raise them like calves in the stall.
And that was talked about.
Did you? Yeah. When they're talking about like all these young children and youth going to Zion and these men going to Zion, and Manti, was called to Zion as well. And he mentioned that. And I remember thinking, like, that's such a weird saying to me from an outsider. Like, raise like a calf in a stall, I'm like, to be slaughtered. Like, I don't know. Like, to me, I don't know. Does that make sense? Like, it seems so odd from the outside. But did you ever hear that? And what do you think, like, I don't know how to say it, but like, how were the people not weirded out by that saying? Like, what was the viewpoint that they would look at that with?
Yeah. No, I do remember hearing it, and I believe it became a more famous term once I moved out as well. It seems like it anyway, based on the way Manti talked about it. But we looked at it as more of we need to stay within our boundaries. Like, we're giving this, we are given this piece of, I guess, land that we need to stay within those boundaries and do what we're told. and that we would always be protected because they would be watching over us and taking care of us and giving us food and water. So we looked at it as more of a tried to look at it as a positive thing, I guess. But
Yeah.
but no matter how you look at it now that I'm no longer a part of it, no matter how I try to tweak it to make it seem okay, it still sounds awful. So I'm not sure who came up with this term. Maybe it was Warren Jeffs himself, but I don't know what they were thinking. That just doesn't sound like a nice thing.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like he was grooming the
Oh, that's
children on the ranch, right?
100% what he was doing. That was his intention all along.
Yeah. And they said in there that they said the women of God were more mature. And that kind of hit me hard too, because that's what they were telling the girls, like, you're more mature, and that's why you can be married younger, because you're more mature. Did you ever hear that the women were more mature at a younger age? Or, I mean, I know you weren't allowed to like associate really closely with many girls, but was that something that was like told throughout the community?
It is, and it's not something that is just in recent times either, but I have been told when some of the men throughout the community were talking about 50, 60, sometimes 100 years ago, when some of these younger women were married to early polygamists, that they were getting married at 15, 14 years old, and that they would always use that term as a way to justify it. That, yeah, but this girl was way more mature than the average girl. Like you could tell that she was ready to be married. And
How convenient.
of course they're going to say that, right?
Yeah.
But no, I mean, these women were, so much information was kept from them, right? About so many things, about sexual things, about just normal life things that, and to try to say that they're more mature, that just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Now, it kind of goes to where, like, at the ranch, the people around the ranch, as the temple's starting to be built and that's starting to gain traction, and people are like, what's going on in there? A lot of people were saying, well, just leave them alone because nothing bad's happening. Like, leave them alone. And I know I mentioned this like quickly in the last video, but that was kind of how I grew up believing as well in St. George, where you're 45 minutes away from them. And I remember thinking, why are people religiously like being persecuted for their religious beliefs? And they just need to be left alone, having no idea that there was, rape and underage marriage and those type of things going on. And it just made me think of that same thing. Like, it's so easy to just be like, well, nothing's happening. But if everyone continued to turn a blind eye forever, they wouldn't be able to protect those children in the future. So it's an interesting, tricky situation.
It's very interesting. It is. I know growing up in the situation, I felt like everything was fine. No big deal. And so we hoped that everyone would just leave us alone. Like that's what we would say. I wish everyone would just leave us alone.
Yeah.
And the women would say that too. And the children would say that too, because we thought that everything was, oh, this is fine. This is what God wants. Now, things got a lot worse. And so I imagine that a lot of these women that were dealing with what Warren was causing, they probably had different feelings that this just can't. This just can't be right.
Yeah.
I would hope. So I'm glad that it all kind of came crumbling down in some way.
Yeah. Elisa then is kind of sharing her story of meeting Lamont, trying to get a little bit more independence to be able to escape like the abuse that was happening in her marriage, which that whole situation obviously is still just so heartbreaking. But
get out of it.
Yeah, good for her to be able to move to Hurricane, which is right outside of St. George. And yes, it is spelled like hurricane, but if you're from Southern Utah, you call it Hurricane.
It's Hurricane.
Just so you know. So there's a little lesson for everyone, so you can say it like a true Southern Utahn.
So when you're referring to an actual hurricane, do you say, look, it's a hurricane?
No, you still say, okay, so if it's a hurricane, like the weather, then you still call it a hurricane.
Okay, but the place is hurricane.
But the place is Hurricane. I have no idea why. It doesn't make any sense, but
I grew up calling it hurricane too. So
yeah.
I try to give my old accent there a little bit.
A little bit. But when she moves there and then she gets called by her sister and says like, okay, you really should go to law enforcement because you actually were an underage bride and you can do this. And I thought it was so powerful that she was doing it for her sisters. And knowing that her sisters are still out there, and I know Sam talks about this frequently, how hard it is to know when you have sisters that are still out there, not knowing what's going to happen to them. Luckily, in the strange course of events that have happened since Sam's left, like, no, there are no marriages going on, so his sisters can't be married, which is, I'm sure, comforting a little bit, right? Like the fact that they can't be married underage right now.
Yeah, so it's a good thing in that sense, but you know, these younger kids growing up, they're going to have natural tendencies to want to be with someone in that. So we'll see what happens. I have a feeling that a lot of people will just end up moving out because, or at least I hope that's the case. We'll see, or they'll just
they reach out to us and then they can
right.
We can help them get out and get on their own feet. But yeah, anyway, I thought that was really, really brave of her to be willing to go through it and be willing to go talk about all the abuse and everything.
And do it for her family.
And do it for her sisters and her family. And in this episode, she doesn't really mention whether or not her sisters end up leaving. Did she?
I don't know. Maybe in the next and final episode, she will mention something along those lines. We have watched it, but I don't remember for sure if she talks about it or not.
Hopefully those sisters are able to take advantage of the awesome gift that their sister gave a lot of people out there.
I do remember hearing of Lisa Wall when still living out there, and the view of her was not a good thing. Because of course she was fighting against Warren Jeffs, and for those that still follow Warren Jeffs, which I did at that time, we only had negative thoughts towards her. Like, oh, I can't believe that. Like, she's obviously working for Satan and trying to bring down God's church, and it was just a lot of negative things. But that's kind of how it is, though, for people that leave the community out there. We're looked at as bad people,
no matter what the circumstance was. Did you guys know like what she was trying to bring against Warren Jeffs? Like why she was fighting against him? Or like what she was doing? Or was it just Lisa Wall is bad, ignore her, she's evil, doing Satan's work?
Yes, that's basically what it was. But I don't remember any details.
So they weren't actually like telling you what was going on. It was just... That sounds like typical Warren.
Not that
tell him anything.
Not that I can remember. And honestly, a lot of the people in the community, even the older people in the community, probably didn't really know what happened, what Warren forced her to do, you know, and so they probably assumed that it was all just lies and she was just trying to cause problems.
Yeah. And when she did stand up and they were trying to find him for being an accomplice to rape, and he started his... Well, he had already kind of been on the run, right? Which we know. But then he went on to the top 10 most wanted. Do you remember when that happened? Like, what was the community thinking? Because obviously he'd already been kind of on the run and kind of coming in and out for marriages and coming to meetings just to kick out 20 high-profile men and those type of things. But do you guys remember, did you hear that he was on the top 10 most wanted list?
Oh, boy. I'm trying to remember when he became, or when he was put on that list, but I do remember it, and I do remember thinking that, wow, this is obviously the true church, because look how hard Satan is fighting against it. Those were my thoughts, and I'm sure the rest of the community felt the same way because of the way we were taught. That's just the way it was, you know. The harder the more that they would fight against Warren Jeffs, the stronger our testimony of the church being true became. And so when we saw that he was wanted by the FBI and was on the top of the lists and all of that, we just assumed, well, here we go. But I never in a million years thought he would ever get caught. I assumed that God would always protect him. And so you can imagine the shock that I felt when he did, because I was still living out there. I was still a very, very faithful member of the FLDS church when Warren was caught and when he was sent to prison. And I just remember, I mean, it was kind of like a slap in the face, kind of, you know? I mean, I assumed, oh, well, there's no way they could ever catch him. So And of course, the leaders of the church tried to quickly turn it around as, well, this happened to a lot of prophets of old. No big deal. This has happened before, and he will come out stronger, and he will continue on God's work. And we were always told that he would eventually break down the prison walls and walk out in his glory, and that God would be on his side, and all of these things. And the men and the women that put him in prison to begin with would be smitten.
Sorry, we watch Moana too much with our babies.
Anyway, so that was kind of the idea. And I know that those that still follow him still to this day believe that he's going to eventually come out and continue on leading the people. So
the last thing that I wanted to touch on that was kind of towards the end was talking about the tithing calls. And for those of you who aren't familiar with tithing, typical tithing, I think in a lot of different Christian religions, and then especially in the mainstream LDS church, is 10% of your income. The LDS church, it's 10% of your income, and you just pay that whenever, but it's always supposed to be 10% of your yearly income.
Yeah.
The FLDS don't do it exactly the same. They do like calls where rather than it being 10% of your income, they would just ask for money whenever they needed it, and you just had to be able and ready whenever they called for it, right?
Yep, tithing calls. And it was, at first, when I was out there, it was like once a month. Once a month, every male adult was required to give like $1,000.
$1,000 a month.
That was kind of where it was at when I left. And now it sounds like that as time went on, then all of a sudden it was weekly, and and then they were just a lot and asking for more than $1,000. So it seems like it's just so sad, but it seems like so many of these families were giving away or giving to the church more money than they had, more money than they were making. So they would have to get into debt to be able to give the church the amount of money that Warren was asking for. Yeah. And obviously he didn't care. And now we know what he was. I mean, he did build the ranch in Zion with the money, obviously. Well, maybe the materials, but he was forcing all the people to come and do it for free.
Do the labor for free.
And then he was off partying, it sounds like, using all this money. It's just, oh my goodness.
Yeah. Did you ever hear about like the cans of tomato sauce?
No, that was after my time. I think
it's probably because you were a teenager still, because it was before he got caught. You were still out there.
Was it before he got?
It was before he got caught.
Oh, never mind. So no, I just wasn't in the know.
Were you forced to pay? Because I'm trying to remember if I know the answer to this, but you had to be normally 18 before you'd get a tithing call, right? So as a teenager, you wouldn't have been called anyway.
As a younger teenager, I was giving money to my father, and I imagine that he was giving a lot of money, his money, to the church.
Got you, but you didn't personally have.
So in a way, we were funneling it through the family into the church, I guess you could say, even under the age of 18. But now I'm starting to wonder if all of this stuff in the tomato cans and $300,000 a week, who can blow, like, I love Disney and I can spend a lot of money at Disney World, don't get me wrong, but $300,000 a week, like, that's an insane amount of money to blow. I wonder if there's stuff that was going on that we still haven't learned, because that's just a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean,
or if they were stashing a lot of it away somewhere.
Well, and like you said, like, he still was simultaneously having the construction being built and having the temple be built. So it's not that some of that couldn't go, because I seriously can't imagine being able to spend $300,000 a week.
Right.
Would seem crazy. I mean, he is crazy, but it still seems like a lot. So,
but I had no idea about the tomato cans. That was complete shock and news to me. I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah. Sorry, I have one more question because I just barely thought of it. But even after it being, and then we can wrap up, but I mean, you have been out for how many years now?
About 15.
Okay, so almost 15 years now. Mm-hmm. What's the emotion when you feel like you're learning some of these things for the very first time still, even after all this time of having left and realizing what was going on?
The emotion is, holy crap, what else don't I know? And how much more information is there? This isn't really emotion. This is my thought, I guess.
Yeah, that's fine. Your thought.
But it's it's almost a little bit, I guess my emotion is fear of, what else could have been going on and what is still going on. Because even though he's in prison, he's still, in a way, controlling the people. And so I definitely am a little bit afraid for my family that still is following his teachings and all of that. And I hope the best for them. I really do. And I love them and am here for them if they ever need anything. But yeah, I'm a little bit afraid on what else could be going on and what else was going on that I just haven't heard about yet.
Yeah. So the part 3 ends with Warren being caught outside of Las Vegas. Hip hip hooray for our town for catching him finally. Yeah. And that's kind of where it ends. And obviously next week, our part 4, the finale, is going to be wrapping up a lot of things. It's definitely a tough episode to watch. Yeah. So buckle up for part 4. But
yeah, and I liked what they said. I liked what they said at the very end of the episode 3, that we thought, okay, thank goodness Warren is caught. It's all over. But little did we know it was just the tip of the iceberg. And that is so true, because the things that he was able to accomplish from his prison cell and force the people to continue doing, just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So
unfortunately, it was getting worse, not better.
Right.
When that happened. But if you guys want to know more about what it was like for Sam growing up in polygamy, please like and subscribe. And thank you all so much for all of your awesome comments and questions. Please continue asking them, because we love doing videos that are answering the questions that you have. So
yes, thank you all. And for all of you new subscribers, thank you for being here and welcome. I hope you enjoy it. And we look forward to talking to you soon.
Talk to y'all soon.